Hello again and welcome to this week's video briefing. The topic today is Venezuela. It's been a dramatic few days in Venezuela. We had the election, the presidential election on Sunday, an election occasioned by a very high turnout, a good deal of global interest because it centered very much on the future of that system, represented by the person who is identified very closely with the country for well over a decade now, namely President Hugo Chavez. He was re-elected by, I think, we could say a comfortable margin of some 10% compared with the opposition, but the opposition did well. One of the issues that was very much to the forefront of this campaign was the health of President Chavez, which has not been good for a long time. Indeed, it is in terminal decline now. The question of succession has to some extent been settled, or at least we've got a lot more information about it over the last 24 hours because the newly re-elected president has made an announcement about that, and I'm here to talk about it with my colleague Jill Hedges, senior analyst on Latin America. Jill, let's perhaps say something first of all about the person whom Chavez nominated, and also perhaps to say that we did identify him fairly early on as a likely candidate.
Yes, thanks, Graham. Yes, when he was announced as president-elect by the National Electoral Council yesterday, Chavez designated his foreign minister, Nicolas Maduro, as the new vice president for his new term. Yeah, we did in April think that Maduro was probably the most likely vice presidential candidate. There are a number of factions around Chavez. There are a number of individuals who I think feel that they have some right to be the successor in the event that his health declines terminally. Of all of the possible candidates, Maduro seemed to be the most palatable in electoral terms. He's a moderate. He is pretty generally well regarded. There are more radical candidates like Chavez's brother Adan and Diosdado Cabello, who's president of the National Assembly, who are less appealing to voters, I would say, than Maduro. But Chavez delayed any kind of announcement until after the election because it was bound to cause frictions within people within his movement. What this does mean is that Maduro will take over as vice president when Chavez is re-inaugurated in January. There's every indication that Chavez will probably step down before too much longer. His health is obviously not good. It's been deteriorating. There will have to be new elections if he actually steps down or dies, but one possibility is that in the nearer term he might delegate increasingly to Maduro in order to raise his political profile before he actually steps down. And if Maduro is built up as a strong successor, then in all probability his chances in new elections would be very, very good. The government's got momentum behind it now. In spite of having had a fairly strong opposition candidate, he's still won by a comfortable margin, as you say. So now that his successor has in effect been designated, I think he would probably have a very strong chance of winning new elections. I think one thing we perhaps don't know is how much Chavez's own personality will complicate this handover. He's not somebody who has wanted to delegate in the past. He did not delegate to the current vice president when he was in Cuba receiving cancer treatment. It seems to go rather against his personality. So how effective he's going to be in sort of passing the mantle to a successor is kind of an open question, yes.
It is. It must be a test for both men in a way. We've said that Chavez won by a comfortable margin, which he did indeed do so in, after all, pretty peculiar circumstances, not only because of his health, but because there's much wrong with the way the economy, the way the society has been run. The opposition did rather well. Better than any previous anti-Chavez opponent.
Enrique Capriles, the opposition candidate, I think did very creditably. He got a little over 44% of the vote, which compares with about 36% for the opposition in the previous presidential election. He did that mainly by promising not to change social policy very much. He promised to maintain and improve social programs. So I think, if you put together 55% of the vote for Chavez plus significant backing for that kind of promise from Capriles, what it means is that we're not going to see big policy shifts because there's quite a lot of support of government policy generally. I think there is a lot of concern about efficiency, about corruption, problems with crime, problems with misspending. But I think these are things that probably the majority of people see as problems that need to be ironed out rather than real policy errors that need to be changed. So I don't think we'll see major shifts in policy.
So the absorption that's going to be on the part of the elite or perhaps part of the public is the transition, when and how it will occur. That's where the energy will go, the concentration will go. We don't see any of the parameters laid down, either broadly speaking in domestic terms or in wider relations with the outside world being challenged in any sense in the next few months and perhaps beyond.
I think not significantly, certainly. Maduro is a pragmatist. He's very much a Chavez loyalist. He's been part of the Chavez movement since its inception, really. He's been foreign minister for the last 6 years, so I think he's well known in the region. He's seen as a known quantity. I don't think there will be major shifts in foreign relations under Maduro. And as I say, I don't think he can probably change a great deal in terms of policy. Where there may have to be some shifts is in economic policies such as the exchange rate, for instance, which is very overvalued. I think now that there's going to be this change in this succession in leadership, we almost have to see this as continuing to be in a presidential campaign. So the government is not really going to want to take unpopular decisions like a devaluation.
Anything left to nationalize?
There are many things left, and there is some focus on, I think, probably retail sectors or other sectors that will come under pressure. I don't think there's not much left in the sort of extractive sectors that would be targeted.
And a foreign interest, is there much out there in the sense that there's a risk of vulnerability to nationalization, expropriation, call it what you will?
I think probably not. Foreign interest is increasingly concentrated in Russian and Chinese investment in the extractive sector particularly. That isn't going to be touched, but on the other hand, there is a risk there as well that a lot of Chinese loans have been spent already, not on productive investment, but on housing and social programs, and that's going to be paid for in future in oil production. So if oil output isn't stepped up, which so far they haven't successfully done, a lot of future production is already committed.
Finally, let's talk about the region and how the election result looks from the various capitals. We'll say something about perhaps Bogota and further afield in a moment, but maybe we could begin with DC, where we are facing an election as well.
Of course.
And if we have a Republican victory there, there's some capacity for the venom that is never very far below the surface to be reignited in relations between Venezuela and the United States.
We could certainly see a deterioration in bilateral relations, I think, if Romney is elected. The Obama administration has managed Chavez fairly well, largely by ignoring him, so there have not been the kind of frictions that we saw with the Bush administration. It's a less important relationship than it was in some ways because U.S. imports of oil are declining generally, and there hasn't been ambassadorial representation now for a while. But it is still Venezuela's largest export market, so ideally it would behove everyone to try to maintain at least a polite relationship. I think if Obama is re-elected, then there might be some softening. There will probably be a new ambassador appointed. If Romney is elected, all the signs are that he would revert to the much harsher critical line against Caracas, which clearly would lead to further deterioration.
And some of the countries on Venezuela's doorstep, perhaps beginning with Cuba, where there'd presumably be some relief at the outcome.
I think the Cubans are very relieved at the outcome because there were certainly signs that Capriles would review the existing oil agreements, for instance. There was speculation several months ago that the Castros had been involved in the idea of nominating Maduro as the successor. So I don't think there will be any dissatisfaction there. But also the closer neighbors like Brazil and Colombia, I don't think they will be distressed either. The current Colombian government has been very good at getting on with Chavez. They had made every sign that they would get on with Capriles. I think they're very pragmatic. They'll get on with whoever's there. And I think for the neighbors, it's probably better that you have a clear succession and you have a lower risk of instability in Venezuela, because I think that's the key concern rather than who is actually the president.
Jill, thank you very much. And thank you for watching. If you're a client of Oxford Analytica, you will know that we have been providing analysis on the Venezuelan situation over the last few days and propose to do some more in the next few days. If you're not a client and would like to see that, we'd be delighted to hear from you, as we would indeed about any aspect of our work as a firm on explaining the links between politics and business. Do contact us via our website. In the meantime, thanks for watching.